Hey guys, so excited to be back today because we are talking all about headlines. Now, I love talking about headlines because I'm sure you all realize that on social media, that is one of the first things that you're going to be compelled to either click through and consume more of that brand's content, or to share that content to your page, or to just scroll on by because that article is not going to be something you're going to actually read. So, as content creators, it's something that we need to spend a lot of time on. And I know I've been guilty of sharing an article with someone who I thought that it would speak to without actually reading it myself, just based on the headline. So that's kind of the importance of headlines. It really allows you to make sure your content is getting to the right people, who it's going to resonate with, and who it's going to help. And if you need ideas on your headlines, we've got a really cool system for you that we use here at MeetEdgar, and we refer to as our headline generating machine. So let's dive right on in. The reason that it's really important to have this system and to kind of look at this as an entire process when you're writing your blogs is because you truly can't control really who clicks through on your content, right? You can't really blame your followers for clicking through or not clicking through, but what you can control is the process of how you generate the best headlines so your content gets in front of the people that it's meant for. So the concept here is simple. For every single blog post, podcast, or video, or whatever form of content you make, you're going to want to write 20 headlines that could be used in this article. So 20 headlines, you might be saying, wait a minute, Megan, that sounds like a huge waste of time. If you've never done this before, I really encourage you to, because the first few that you generate are not going to be the strongest headlines. They're not going to have the details, the adjectives, the curiosity-piquing details that you can actually add in to get awesome headlines. But if you do 20 of them, it's likely you'll come up with one that you're going to love. Now, if you're looking for ideas as you're starting to generate these headlines, I always recommend thinking about the keywords within your articles that are really descriptive. So the reason that this matters is, of course, for SEO, you know those keywords are something that the algorithms are looking for in order to inform what content is great for people. But it's also really great to make sure that you're doing this so that your content gets more reach on search engines as well. So a couple of the tools that I really suggest using to get some keyword inspiration and to set the expectation of what your followers are actually going to be able to read when they click through and are directed to your blog is one called Keywords Everywhere. That's actually a paid app, but it's really fantastic. Another one is Neil Patel's tool, Ubersuggest. Both of these are somewhere you can go and put in keywords. So like a keyword for me, Edgar, might be something like social media marketing tips or something like that. If I type these into these tools, it'll actually generate the search volume of how many searches per month occur around these words. So I can start to look and see, okay, is this something that's really well searched online? If it is, that keyword might be something I want to include in my headline. These will also give you kind of ideas for related keywords that you could use in some of the additional brainstorming headlines that you generate. So if you've never done a Keywords Everywhere or Ubersuggest search around your typical keywords, definitely go check those out. I think it'll be a huge help in getting some inspiration when you're writing your articles. And remember, keywords aren't everything. You want to get really specific into adjectives and really specific into fun details that pique people's curiosity. The reason that I'm really stressing keywords at the beginning here is because we always, again, want to set up expectations because that's what builds trust. And you know, here at MeetEdgar, we're all about making sure you're building trust online. So if someone clicks from your social media based on a headline to your blog, and the article that they're reading is not what they were expecting, their trust in you starts to fall back a little bit more. So I really suggest making sure that those keywords are something you do keep in mind. All right, so that's level one, just sitting down and generating 20 different headlines for every piece of content that you produce. If you want to go a little bit further, you really can step this up by having a system. And remember, you know, it's okay if you haven't done this before in the past. It's okay if you're just starting out new to stop at that 20 headlines for now and incorporate the second half. I always want you to implement the tips that we're giving here. And sometimes if I'm giving these second steps that they feel like this whole system is overwhelming, go ahead and tune this part out and just get that as a part of your system, get familiar with it, see the results from it, and come back later so that you can implement the second stage here. Because that implementation is where the magic comes in, not just the learning part. And if you have any limiting beliefs about like why you're not a great writer and why generating 20 different headlines is not going to be productive, work on really getting over those too. You know, me personally, I actually grew up and still am a pretty atrocious speller. I don't know where I missed out in my education there, but that was something that I feel like for a long time made me think I wasn't a writer. Once I got over that limiting belief that, hey, spell check exists, I can still be a really great writer, I was much more comfortable doing these brainstorming exercises and writing 20 different headlines for the articles that we're writing. So get those limiting beliefs out of the way and make sure you've implemented step number 1 before we move on to step number 2. So level 2 is going to be to have this formula in mind. So what is a good formula to write a headline? Well, it goes back to one of the core concepts of MeetEdgar, which is categories. So you know our software is all based upon having a categorical system of posting to social media so that you get a really good mix of content out there. Same with your headlines. When you're generating these 20 different headlines, think about how you can break them up into different categories. So you could do something like writing 5 ones that have to do with inspirational headlines, 5 that are educational headlines, 5 that are relatability and behind the scenes headlines, and 5 that are more like objection handling headlines. So you see how those categories are actually pretty similar to your social media posts anyway. Use that as a framework to know it's going to work in order to give you a great variety. So some examples here for like inspirational headlines that we could use as a social media automation tool is something like, let's write an article and say how I save 8 hours a week on social media using MeetEdgar and spend that time with my family instead. That's a great headline because A, it tells people the outcome that we're going to give them, and it paints a picture that they can be inspired by saying, yes, that's something that I want in my life. I want that time freedom. Another inspirational headline we could think of would be something like, hey, the advice I heard that changed my business forever, or something like that. Again, it's inspirational, giving people the ability to say, ooh, I want to hear that advice so I can change my business as well. Another inspirational example headline is we write a lot of journey-oriented articles. So we have one that's like my journey to 5,000 users or my journey to 100K months and how you can get that too. So you see how these are inspiring people to take the lessons that you've learned and put those to action. So those are inspirational headlines you can come up with for your actual content. So you'll brainstorm some of those and then maybe move on to like educational headlines. So something like how-to articles. So for MeetEdgar example, how to find the right times to post on social media, how to set up a blogging calendar, how to get to inbox 0. So could you look at that article and say, okay, do I have an inspirational headline that works well? What if I shifted this headline and did a how-to instead? So it would be the same article, but you would be thinking, okay, does the inspirational side hit the point better, or does the how-to side hit the point better? You could do this same exercise with relatability and behind the scenes content. So taking the same article and thinking, if I wanted this to be more relatable and tell my actual story and get a little bit more vulnerable here, what kind of headline could I produce there? So it could be something like, how our remote team sets up their offices. We've done blog posts about like our office as a remote team. So again, think about how that one article could actually be relatable and have that relatability headline. Last, think about what kind of objections you get when you're trying to sell your product or service and make your headline centered around that. I think objection handling is one of the things we forget to bring into our content proactively, and we just deal with them when people actually write in. But remember, the content you're writing on your blog, the podcast that you're producing, all of these give you the ability to handle objections that people might be thinking and actually not reaching out to you. I always like to think about it when I'm in our support inbox as this idea of, if one person is writing in about a problem, it's likely 10 other people have that question and they're just not reaching out. And your content can kind of be the bridge between that and make sure that they're still getting the answers to their questions. So one article, remember, look at it in the way that is it best headlined with an inspirational one, an educational headline, a really behind the scenes headline, or an objection handling headline, and you'll get a good mix. Again, just bringing you closer to finding the perfect headline that people are going to be compelled to click through, that piques people's curiosity, but also sets the user's expectation of the content that they're going to see once they click over and actually consume the content on your site. So have those categories set there. And this system, it might sound a little bit complicated as I'm starting to rattle this off, but it truly does make sure that your blog post articles are characterized in a way that people from every single segment in your funnel are going to get value from. So some additional questions that I'm going to leave you here before I sign off to the day is to make sure your content is always centered around what your audience wants to read. Now, we talk a lot about that know, like, and trust factor and making sure you put yourself into your content a lot, and your business should be centered around yourself because that makes you unique, right? That's a lot of your unique selling proposition these days, especially in a crowded marketplace, is going to be how you approach that subject matter. However, your headlines should really have the actual people who are consuming the content in mind more than anything. So make sure that you have that lens on of who your ideal audience is. So ask yourself, what do you do in your business and who do you do it for? If you've never written out a statement, go ahead and write that statement out so that you have an idea in your head about who your ideal customer avatar is. What problem do you solve for them? Remember, people are really motivated by pain points. So if you can, in your headlines, actually kind of weave in some of the pain they're experiencing in their life, like for MeetEdgar, the pain of having to log into social media, babysit your feeds all the time, and waste time that you could be spending in other areas of your business, we could weave that into saying, how do I save 8 hours a week on social media? So make sure you have a really strong idea of what problem you're actually solving for your ideal client there. And last, what do you represent to them? Remember in that first headline example, we said, how do I save 8 hours a week on social media so I can then go spend that time with my family? We represent freedom to them. And you should have that ability to rest and recuperate and have a balance in your business in that way. So what do you represent? Do you represent like health if you are an actual and a fitness trainer or a nutrition coach in that way? And what does that health actually represent? Does it represent them being able to live more fully in their lives, to be able to go out and be healthy with their families for longer, stuff like that? So just think about it in that level of taking it one step further of what you're actually offering behind your physical product or behind your services. So one other thing that I think you're going to like to weave into some of your headlines, but not all of them, is this idea of actually having like time significance in there. Now, I know on these live streams, we talk a lot about evergreen content, right? Making sure that the content you're producing can be used more than once, because this is the ability to make sure that your new followers are always getting a well-rounded view of who you are. It allows you to step off the content creation treadmill and be able to share that content more than once on all areas online. However, sometimes the strongest headlines are going to resonate with the time of year it is. So one example that we have here at MeetEdgar is we have a solopreneur guide for surviving the holiday season. So if you're traveling and you're trying to spend time with friends and family, but you're a solopreneur, what are you going to actually do about making sure that you're balancing your work and your travel time with your family? So this is an evergreen piece of content in the sense that we can share it every single year, and the tips in there will continue to be successfully employed by solopreneurs, but it's not something we're going to share, of course, all the time, right? So it's kind of evergreen still, but it has that time significance in it. And that's the stuff that people click through a lot on headlines because it resonates to what's going on in their life, right? So make sure some of your headlines might be a little more time specific for holidays. Gift guides do really well. Like recipes for summertime cookouts right now do really well. Stuff like that. So if that's relevant to your brand, tying that significance to a time could be something you consider doing in your headline to get a little bit more traffic to your site, because it's going to speak to what's going on with people's lives. Cool. So I'm super excited to know how the headline generating machine tactic works for you guys. If you want to dive in a little bit further, there's a link in the description to the video that goes into kind of our entire content creation strategy on how to write a really great article, basically applicable to any niche, any subject matter. So check that out if you want to dive in deeper. And let me know how your headlines are turning out in the comments below. And I will see you guys again soon. Have a good one.